Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I will commence with the prayer. योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणम् सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः श्रीकृष्णवागीशयतीश्वराभ्यां सम्प्राप्तचक्राङ्कणभाष्यसारम् श्रीनूत्नरङ्गेन्द्रयतौ समर्पितस्वम् श्रीकृष्णमार्यं गुरुवर्यमीडे विरोधे कार्तिके मासे शतताराकृतोदयम् योगाचार्यं कृष्णमार्यं गुरुवर्यमहं भजे कृष्णसूरीदयापात्रं ज्ञानवैराग्यभूषणं श्रीमद्वेङ्कटनाथार्यं वन्देऽहं योगदेशिकम् श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Namaste. Today we will continue in this second part with the Sankhya philosophical tenets. So, in the previous session, we saw about the history of Sankhya philosophy. Um, so that we just to give a brief recap of what we saw yesterday, we just saw that Sankhya philosophy can be the history of Sankhya philosophy can be traced in three segments. That is the proto Sankhya, the ancient references where Sankhya was taking shape, and then the pre Sankhyakarika period, and then Sankhyakarika and its uh, subsequent period to Sankhyakarika. So these are the three stages, and it could be seen that though there are so many texts in Sankhya philosophy, various texts at various period has have emerged, but the central definitive text that captures the essence of Sankhya teachings is the Sankhya Karika of Ishvara Krishna in the 4th century of the Common Era. So when we are speaking about Sankhya philosophical tenets, so naturally, so the tenets as has been discussed in Sankhya Karika, so that will be the way in which we will be approaching. So the textual basis for the exposition of this talk on Sankhya philosophical tenets is Sankhya Karika. So I was informed for this lecture to dwell upon the concepts of Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna, Prakriti Purusha, Viveka Jnana, the 25 Tattvas, the Gunas and their role, Satkaryavada and Parinamavada. So these are the topics that were suggested for me to be touched upon in this lecture. So I will touch upon these topics from Sankhya philosophy, um, but I would take it in a approach where not dealing them as secluded or independent topics, how these topics form a chain of thought. So how they all form part of the flow of Sankhya knowledge. So I would like to approach it that way rather than isolated independent topics on Sankhya. We will see in the flow of the Jnana, knowledge of Sankhya, how all these fit in. What is their context? What is the context? What is the basis? And where do these fit in? Of course, if time permits, we will also see how it is applicable in connection to our learning and practice of yoga. So this is how I propose to approach this topic. So as I said, the talk is based on the Sankhya Karika of Ishvara Krishna, about which I had briefly mentioned earlier. So which belong to the 4th, 5th century. And then this is the basis of all later philosophical discussions. And anywhere between 70 to 73 verses in the Arya meter, this text is found. I also mentioned about the translation and retranslation of this Sankhya Karika text. Its global reach already in the past, in the 5th, 6th century itself, it was revered as a golden treatise. So such was the value, Suvarna Saptati. So, but though this text contains 73 verses, uh, 69 verses are the ones which convey the philosophical tenets. The rest of the verses, 3 or 4 verses after 69, they convey about the Guru Parampara, how the knowledge was transmitted, all that is found. Hence, the core of the knowledge is found in 69 verses. And then we saw, and the earliest among the numerous commentators of Sankhya is Gaudapada. And the thoughts that are discussed here are basically, when we discuss on Sankhya Karika, the guidance inputs of Acharya Gaudapada will be consulted in the process of discussing the philosophy or the tenets or the thoughts of Sankhya Karika. Now, before going into the topics, so I just mentioned that Sankhya Karika has a 69 verses. So, how are the topics, or what are the topics that are arranged in the Sankhya philosophy? It will be good to have an overview of what these 69 verses contain in general. So, this is just an overview that I am going to give. So, I will just look at it as cluster of verses, group of verses. So, set of verses, what do they convey? And what is their philosophical, or what is the flow of thinking in these 69 verses. So that we will initially see. So in the first 3 verses of the Sankhya Karika, the scope and the task of Sankhya that is introduced, and the instruments of knowledge. So when some method of knowledge is proposed, then what are the accepted instruments? What are the pramanas? So that are discussed in verses 4 to 8. And then the notion immediately after that, in the 9th verse, we get the notion of pre-existent effect. That is the Satkarya Vada. So those topics which are in a special color, so they will be dwelled. We will dwell on them in little more detail, because they are the ones which are given to me to be covered in this lecture. So immediately at the very beginning of the text, we find the mention of the Satkarya Vada in verse 9. And then we have the, of course, the Vyakta Avyakta concept is presented, verses 10 and 11. This will also be elaborated. So I should have marked this also in this special color. So that will also be taken up. And then the 3 constituents, the 3 gunas in the Sankhya philosophy, they are touched upon in the verses 12 and 13. So you can see that I am summing the whole text based on the flow of the verses 1 to 3, 4 to 8, 9, 10 and 11. So all this. So in this way, I'll be touching upon the entire text, what it conveys, a bird's eye view. So that is essential before we get into the concepts. So then comes the discussion on the three gunas, the sattva, rajas and tamas in 2 verses. And then in about 5 verses from verse 14 to 19, there are inferences or the anumanas that are discussed which establish the need of prakriti and purusha. The prakriti and purusha's logical inferential requirement, its existence. So that is established in verses 14 to 19, and then verses 20 and 21 they speak about prakriti purusha sanyoga, and then the evolution of basic principles, that is prakriti, mahan, ahankara, etc. So that is just summed up in just one verse 22, and then we have the functions of all these evolutes from prakriti. So what is mahat, what is its role? Mahat is also called as buddhi, and then ahankara, the 10 senses, the manas. So in verses 23 to 37, the functions of all these evolutes from prakriti are discussed, and then the subtle and gross elements, they are discussed, the bhutas, the panchabhutas and the tanmatras. Tanmatras are subtle elements and gross elements are the panchabhutas. Their role, their function are discussed in verses 38 and 39. And then 3 verses 40 to 42 speak about the linga sharira. So the sukshma sharira or the linga sharira. So there is an external body which is the physical body made of the sapta dhatus, rasa, rakta, mamsa, majja, meda, asthi, snayu. So that external body is there. Similarly, there is a linga sharira, there is a subtle transmigrational body, so in which all the samskaras, vasanas, etc. reside, and this linga sharira travels from one birth to the other. So that concept, that is also presented here in this segment. And then this is very interesting portion. After this, the basic predispositions, these are called as the bhavas and pratyaya sarga. This is more connected with our yogic thought. In yoga we speak about chitta vrittis, the activities of the mind. So this portion speaks a lot about the basic predispositions or the patterns of thinking or the basic fundamental activities of the mind. As in Yoga Sutra we have panchavrittis, pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. But here the discussion is much more elaborate. There is dharma, jnana, vairagya, aishwarya, and then viparyaya, shakti, tushti, siddhi, and there are 50 variations, 50 variations, all that is discussed in this segment. So this becomes a very interesting portion. And then the bhautika sarga. So previously this is called as pratyaya sarga. This division is called as pratyaya sarga, means the world within. So there is an internal creation. There is an internal world that we live in. Our own mind itself is a universe. Itself is a world. It is populated by so many tendencies, so many impressions, vasanas, etc. So actually we are all living twofold lives. One is life within, which is conveyed by pratyaya sarga. We have our own notions, our own biases, our own prejudices, if you want to put that word. So we have our own internal world, and then so this is pratyaya sarga, and then this is bhautika sarga. So other creations are also there. So the prakriti, mahat, ahankara, panchatanmatra, etc., that speaks about the creation at large, the cosmic creation. Pratyaya sarga in Sankhya speaks about the creations within, within the body. So within our own the intellectual or the intellect or the chitta creations that we have within. And bhautika sarga is the creation around us immediately, fellow beings like animals, plants, humans, so their divisions. So the Vaishvika Sarga means the cosmological creation is one topic which is only discussed basically about Sankhya, but this Pratyaya Sarga is not discussed. No, normally it is not, unfortunately not discussed, and the Bhautika Sarga is also not generally discussed when this Sankhya is spoken of. So three types of creations are presented in Sankhya. So that is discussed from verses 53 to 56. The Bhautika Sarga, what are the kinds of animals, plants and human beings, Jarayuja, Andaja, Udbhija, Swedaja, all those four types of animals, mammals, and all those oviparians, all kinds of beings are discussed in verse in the ninth topic, that is 53 to 56. And then the functions of Prakriti means all these creations that we spoke of, be it the Bhautika Sarga, be it the Pratyaya Sarga, or be it the Vaishvika Sarga, or we can call it as Prakrita Sarga. So Prakrita Sarga means that which starts from Prakriti. So that is Prakrita Sarga, Pratyaya Sarga, and Bhautika Sarga. So all these happen on the substratum of Prakriti only. So all these three can be put together and can be seen only as the workings of Prakriti only. And what is the purpose of existence of Prakriti? Bhoga and Apavarga of Purusha. Means worldly experience for the consciousness, which is termed as Purusha in Sankhya philosophy. And then Apavarga, finally the release of Purusha from this material existence and allowing him or allowing the Purusha to be established in his pure conscious nature. So that bhoga apavarga functions of Prakriti is presented in about 4 verses 57 to 61. And then the process of attainment of Kaivalya. So how the moksha or the liberation for Purusha happens, that is discussed from verses 62 to 69. And finally, as I mentioned in the beginning, the last 3 or 4 verses, they finally salute or mention the Sankhya tradition. And with that, the text ends. So this introduction to some extent would have given an idea of the flow of thinking of Sankhya. So basically, as you could see, that the Sankhya is focused on Vyakta, Avyakta and the Jna. Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna refers to the Purusha, the pure consciousness. Vyakta and Avyakta both refer to the manifest and unmanifest creations from Prakriti. So that is Vyakta and Avyakta. So how all these expand. Purusha, of course, is constant, non-changing, without any parinama. But what happens in the realms of Vyakta and Avyakta? So that is presented as Bhuta Sarga, sorry, the Prakrita Sarga, the Pratyaya Sarga, the Bhautika Sarga. So all this, all the dance of activities, all the dynamics of activities happen within the realm of Vyakta and Avyakta, the manifest and unmanifest material, whereas Purusha remains stable, steady, unchanging, pure consciousness. But still they are bound. So how this bondage is overcome, and then Purusha attains his pristine, pure conscious nature. So that is the center of central aspect of Sankhya philosophy. This overview would have given an idea about the general movement of thought in Sankhya. Now let us get into the details or the specific topics which are very essential to understand, to get a grounding in Sankhya philosophy and to perceive or to pursue our yogic learning in a better light. Because as I mentioned earlier, or as you might already be aware, Sankhya forms the philosophical basis for yoga. Sankhya, most Sankhyan principles are accepted by yoga. So the cornerstone of yoga is Sankhya. So yoga builds from the Sankhyan theories. It develops. So hence, for your own pursuit of your learning in yoga, this clarity about the Sankhya tenets are very essential. In yoga sutra, you might have already learned or you will be learning in your as part of your course about the same terminologies: prakriti, purusha, all these mahat, ahankara, all these terminologies you will be hearing, and hence they are very much connected with what you are pursuing as part of your yogic learning. Now, the very beginning of how does Sankhya philosophy, or how is the need of Sankhya philosophy established? You can recollect in Yoga Sutra, it simply starts Atha Yoganusha. That's how it starts. Now we will speak about the teachings of yoga. That's how it starts. But Sankhya philosophy starts in a different note. It establishes the need for the study of Sankhya philosophy itself. Why should you study Sankhya? So the need is first established. Once the purpose or the need is established, then we are convinced that we should study this Sankhya and then learn something better, so that which leads to making our lives better. So the purpose of Sankhya needs to be clarified at the outset, and Ishvara Krishna Acharya, he clarifies the purpose. He says Dukkhatrayabhighata, means human life is full of suffering, and basically three types of sufferings they hit us. Abhighata means they effect a blow upon us day in and day out. There is a adhyatmika, adi bhautika, and adi daivika dukkha, suffering. Shariram manasam. Adhyatmika refers to our bodily and mental sufferings. So the body does not cooperate. Someday, you, as part of your yoga practice, if you are regularly practicing, you will experience some days for yoga practice, the body will cooperate. Other days, there is pain here, there is a sprain there, and there is headache, stomachache, etc. And then some days, simply the body is heavy. So there is a lot of suffering changes in the body. And of course, the mind also, it is extremely fickle, as we all know, that it doesn't stay at a place, and hence it is worried, anxious. So that is adhyatmika dukkha, bodily illnesses, ailments, and also the mental afflictions. Everyone, right from a newborn child till a person who is a nonagenarian, 90 years old, everyone experiences this adhyatmika dukkha, troubled by body and the mind. And then adi bhautika dukkha is there, bhutagrama nimittam. That is, uh, our fellow beings are there, our friends, our relatives, our colleagues, our subordinates, so our elders, people younger to us, so and various plants, animals, so people around us. We live, when we lead a social life, we are surrounded by fellow beings, and we are sometimes negatively influenced, and we suffer because of our inability to cooperate or coexist. So when there is coexistence, there is bound to be frictions. So that is, and because of that frictions, there are strains in relationship, anger, raga, dvesha, etc. So suffering afflicted by fellow beings is there. So suffering from our own body, sufferings afflicted or inflicted upon us by fellow beings, and then of course the forces of nature, they also are conducive, inconducive, shita, ushna, vata, varsha, ashanipatadikam. Sometimes it is cold, sometimes it is hot, sometimes it is windy, sometimes it is rainy, sometimes there is a thunder bolt strike. So in this way, the nature also, which is which also leads us to suffering. So this is dukkham we experience, which is the center of our experiences. So we are all afflicted by sufferings. The point is, all these are sufferings. There are, what is the cure? So to overcome these sufferings, one should study Sankhya. So that's how the text begins. Then one will ask a question. No, if I have headache, why should I study Sankhya? I have to take rest or take a tablet and sleep. Or if I have some mental affliction, I have to speak to a counselor. Then get my mental, the cognitive setup correct. So then why should I study Sankhya? And in the same way, the fellow beings and also the nature, it troubles us, so it stays and it goes away. So there are other remedies to these sufferings. Why to study Sankhya? The question is, are these permanent cures? So today I take a pill for my headache, it goes away, it again comes back. In the same way is the relationship with others. It sometimes gets mended and again it is strained. So all this about the nature also, so it is the same way. So the solutions that we have, it is not that we don't have solutions to our sufferings of adhyatmika, adhidaivika and adhibhautika, but these solutions according to Sankhya philosophy are temporary. Means these solutions give us some respite, but the problems keep coming again and again. So even those Vedic prescriptions of performing various rituals, yajnas, yagas, also they are limited, in the sense they don't once for all remove the trouble. So it is necessary to go to the root of dukkha. It is not enough if we simply symptomatically we give some ad hoc solution to our adhyatmika, adidaivika and adibhautika dukhas. We should go to the root. So what is the root of our suffering? We have to go to that and then find out the root cause and then try to solve the problem, so that we can have a permanent solution to our dukkhatraya abhighata. So what is the permanent remedy according to Sankhya? Vyakta, avyakta, jna, vijnanat. That is the permanent remedy for dukkhatraya abhighata. All other remedies are temporary or ad hoc or limited or provide only a transient comfort or happiness, but the permanent remedy according to Sankhya comes from Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna, Vijnana. Vijnana, a clarity about Vyakta, Avyakta and Jna. So the idea here is Sankhya actually is completed in 3 verses. The entire thought process of Sankhya is completed in first 3 verses themselves. The rest of it is just a bhashya or an elaboration upon these first 3 verses. So how does Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna, Vijnana solve all our problems? The Sankhya philosophy states that this Jna is who we really are. We are pure consciousness. And what happens is, but this pure consciousness gets muddled, gets confused in the various movements of Vyakta and Avyakta. The subtle and gross appearances, manifestations of the world. So when this Jna identifies itself with the Vyakta and Avyakta, manifest and unmanifest material of the world outside, then what happens is all this adhyatmika, adidaivika, adibhautika, dukkha. Whereas for this pure jna, pure consciousness, it is not affected, it is unchanging, it is steady, and it is always in the state of bliss. So the idea is one should understand, or one should It is as if, according to Sankhya, we have mixed up everything. Our identity, we mixed our identity with the Vyakta and Avyakta, whereas our nature is pure consciousness. As long as we identify ourselves with the body, mind, senses, and the world around, which are nothing but the Vyakta state of the matter, which emerges from the Avyakta state, suffering will persist because body will suffer, mind will suffer. Suffering will be caused by things outside, be it fellow beings or the entities of nature. All that belongs to Prakriti, and I am Purusha. I am pure consciousness. So, this clarity has to come about. If that comes, then all these sufferings can be addressed or overcome permanently. So that is the solution. But the word Vijnana is important here. It is not that now you have heard that, oh, by Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna, Vijnana, sufferings are overcome. Now have we become free from sufferings right away by hearing this talk? No. What happens is we are so deeply engrossed, or our impressions and knowledge is so entrenched or so connected or muddled or mixed up with the Prakriti that it takes a lot of effort to disassociate the Purusha from the Prakriti. The Purusha Prakriti Viveka is very difficult because of our samskaras, vasanas, etc. The rest of the Shastra, the rest of the Karikas are there to give us this clarity about the workings of Prakriti and the nature of Purusha. So when we clearly understand the workings, manifestations, the various activities of Prakriti and then the pure nature of Purusha, then the clarity will emerge that, oh, we are Purushas and rest of it which causes suffering but is but part of Prakriti. So that is the purpose of the all other discussions, be it Prakriti Purusha Viveka, be the discussion on the Gunas, Satkarya Vada, Parinama Vada, whatnot. All other discussions are basically an expansion of this core purpose of Sankhya. So it is very essential that this principle is understood before we get into the details of Sankhya. Without this basis, study of mere Prakriti Purusha, the gunas, the evolutes in a disconnected manner might not serve the purpose. I hope this basis about Sankhya, the purpose of Sankhya is clear. So all that is clarified by the Shastra in the first three Karikas itself. The rest is an elaboration. Now, when we speak about now it has the discussion has now come that we should have a clarity about Vyakta, Avyakta and Jna. So the Vijnana about Vyakta, Avyakta and Jna has to be achieved. Then now it becomes a necessity that Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna are elaborated. What is Vyakta? What is Avyakta? What is Jna? All that is elaborated. Third verse itself, the Vyakta, Avyakta and Jna are presented in a very nutshell. Mula Prakriti Vikritihi Mahadadya Prakriti Vikritaya Sapta Shodashakastu Vikaraha Na Prakritir Na Vikriti Purusha. So there itself we have a clarity. So Avyakta basically refers to the Mula Prakriti. The Mula Prakriti, the primordial matter. And then Mahadadya Prakriti Vikritaya Sapta Shodashakastu Vikaraha. Mahat, Ahankara, the Pancha Tanmatra, the Pancha Bhutas, the Pancha Indriyas, all these which come about 23 principles. So they are in the realm of Vyakta. And then finally, the Jna is neither Prakriti nor Vikriti. So this is Prakriti. Vyakta is, Avyakta basically is Prakriti and Vyakta is Vikriti. And there is one entity which is neither Prakriti nor Vikriti, that is Purusha. This in essence is a Sankhya philosophy. A clarity about these are needed. So we also see here the 25 principles. So there is one Mula Prakriti, and then there are 23 Prakriti Vikritayaha and Vikritis, and one Purusha who is neither Prakriti nor Vikriti. So what is the meaning of Prakriti and Vikriti? Prakriti means the source of modification, and Vikriti is the modification or the transformation. So the Mula Prakriti or the primordial matter is just the Prakriti, the source of modification, whereas the Mahat, Ahankara and the Pancha Tanmatras are Prakriti Vikritaya. They are both the source of modifications, and they are in turn modifications from the Prakriti. So they are called as Prakriti Vikritaya. And then the Shodashakaha, the Pancha Bhutas, the 10 Indriyas, Pancha Karmendriya, Pancha Jnanendriya and Manas. So these 16, they are merely the Vikritis, the effects. And Purusha is, or the Purusha, which means the pure consciousness, the awareness, that is neither Prakriti nor Vikriti. So this, a clarity about these, which when we add all these, so it becomes 25. So the Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna, all these three, they put together, they clarify, or they constitute 25 Sankhya, 25 numbers, 25 tattvas are there. When we attain a clarity about these 25 tattvas, and also attain a clarity that I am the one tattva, that is Purusha, and not the rest 24, that is when Kaivalya is attained. So as I mentioned, in the very first three verses themselves, we get this clarity. And then Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama. So we have to, when we need to develop a Vijnana, when we need to develop an understanding about Vyakta, Avyakta and Vijnana, it becomes essential that to know anything, there should be instruments. For example, for any science, the theory is important and the instruments for experimentation is also important. Can we merely do science without a lab? So the lab and its instruments are equally important to that of the principles and the philosophy. It is the experimentation which brings about a clarity about the hypothesis or the theories that we have. So this theory has been given about Vyakta, Avyakta, Jna. To test it out, to understand it, we need instruments of knowledge, and Sankhya proposes three instruments of knowledge, three modes of understanding: by direct perception, by inference, and verbal testimony. Even yoga also takes up the same three instruments of knowledge. So when we speak of yoga, when we speak of Sankhya, we have to keep open all these three instruments of knowledge. It is not that we merely, as when you are doing your course on yoga, it is not that you merely learn what the teachers say and then finish your exam and leave. So that doesn't constitute, according to the Shastra, the complete learning. So what does complete learning means? You have to keep open all your three instruments of learning. That is, Pratyaksha means sensory knowledge, by touching, by doing, by seeing, by hearing, all these things. So you have to use your senses and perceive or receive sensory knowledge. So that is one thing. And then Anumana, you should develop based on your own experience about your understanding about the various tenets that are proposed in the Shastras, in Yoga, in Sankhya. All that is proposed, you should subject it to your own thinking process, your own inferential process, whether this is right, whether this is wrong. Can what has been stated in the Shastra, can it be applicable to, in my case? Is it true or not? So we have to use our inferential faculty. And then finally, Agama. There is a limitation to our inferential faculty. Means it is not that everything can be known by our own intellect, by our own inferences. Prior to us, so many acharyas have existed. They have also experimented and they have left their knowledge in the form of texts and literature. And so learning from them and also from the teachings of the teacher who are experienced. So the teachers, they have experience, they are senior to us, they have experienced it. And also they speak about what prior teachers have experimented upon and left as teachings. So that becomes Agama Pramana, verbal testimony. So be it Sankhya, be it Yoga, we have to use all these instruments to subject this philosophical knowledge, be it the knowledge of asana, pranayama, dhyana, or these Prakriti Purusha Viveka, all these have to be subjected to these instruments and we have to verify it for ourselves. That's why these instruments are given. These are not just another topic to cross away, cross over, but we have to become aware of our own instruments and use it so that we can attain a better level of clarity about the philosophical tenets spoken here. And mostly it is also interesting that by using pratyaksha, the vyakta part of prakriti is known. By anumana and agama only, the avyakta and also the purusha is known. So the pratyaksha leads us only to the vyakta, whereas anumana and agama are essential, are to be strengthened if we have to go to the root of our existence, that is avyakta and jna. And hence also these three means of perception, modes of perception are to be sharpened. That is also given at the very outset. Now, now comes an important and interesting and central concept in Sankhya. That is Satkaryavada. Now, why this Satkaryavada? You might have heard about this Satkaryavada. I just mentioned this and the why of it and its implication. We will discuss that also. Now, what is Satkaryavada? Satkaryavada is basically about the cause and effect theory. It is a notion about the cause and effect. So, this idea of cause and effect is very important. It is not only important in philosophy like Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, etc. Even in our day-to-day life, cause and effect is important. Our ability to have the understanding of cause and effect is important. And also, even in scientific pursuits, cause and effect is very important. What is cause? What is effect? So, how does this effect emerge from the cause? So various scientific truths. So the scientists, they see various effects around and then they try to go into the root cause of this. So even when we speak of the coronavirus, so how did they find out or what? So they see the effect of it and then understand that this is how this corona is caused. And so then only by understanding the cause and effect between the effects of corona and then the existence of corona, then they are able to prescribe what to do, what not to do, how to manage ourselves better when corona comes or when there is a possibility of the infection. So be it our own day-to-day situations or be it any scientific pursuits, the knowledge of cause and effect is fundamental. Even a child knows it, cause and effect. If I throw tantrums in house, then I am sure to get a scolding or a beating from my father or mother. So that cause and effect knowledge is there even in a child. So it is very innate to our existence, this idea of cause and effect. At all walks of life, we have this cause and effect, and especially the Indian systems of philosophy, they have spoken they have discussed a lot about cause and effect. And now we see that in Sankhya, coming to the current context of Sankhya also, the cause and effect theory is there. Now, especially we see that from the avyakta, the vyakta emerges. From the primordial subtle matter that is Prakriti, the entire universe emerges. That is the evolution process of Mahat, Ahankara, the Pancha Tanmatras, etc. They emerge. Now, what is the nature of connection between? So, this is a cause and effect. Prakriti is the cause, the Mahat, etc. are the effects. Again, Mahat is the cause, Ahankara is the effect. Ahankara is the cause, and then the Panchatanmatras, the Bhutas, Indriyas are the effect. So, there is an innate connection of cause and effect, and even in our even in the bhautika sarga, so there is the mud and there is the pot, so the clay and the pot, so the clay is there, that is the cause, and then from that the potter creates the pot. So in this way there is in the Sankhya realm also there is cause and effect discussion. Now what is the role of uh, cause and effect, or what is the connection, what is the nature of connection between cause and effect? That is very interestingly proposed here through the Sankhya philosophy, that is Satkaryavada, which means that the effect exists in its prior to its manifestation. The idea is the pot exists in the clay prior to becoming a pot, being made into a pot by a potter. Means the pot exists in the clay already. It is just the manifestation of the pot from the clay. It doesn't mean that the clay or the pot never existed and it suddenly appeared from nowhere. So the karya, the effect, which is the pot, it already exists. It has already existed in the clay, which is the cause. So clay is the cause, pot is the effect. So these are the cause. This is cause and this is effect. So this effect, which is the pot, already existed in the clay before being made into a pot. It has not suddenly appeared from heaven, or it has not suddenly manifested or materialized from nowhere. It already existed in the cause. That is a Satkaryavada. Means the karya, the effect, is sat, existent prior to its manifestation as the effect. It is like saying the oil is existing already in the tila. That is, what do we say? Tila, what is the word in English? So from tila, taila comes. So the tila already contains, or the take another example, the thread and the cloth. So the thread already contains the cloth. Only the coming together of so many threads and organizing them is needed. So that is Satkaryavada. Now, what is the implication of it? We will see it in detail. It is not that Sankhya only proposes this Satkaryavada. Yoga and Vedanta, they also propose Satkaryavada only, but there are slight variations. But Sankhya and Yoga propose the same kind of Satkaryavada, whereas Vedanta speaks in a slightly different manner, but it can also be taken only as, or can be categorized under Satkaryavada. The Vishishtadvaita, Advaita, they also have this a similar notion of pre-existence of the cause in its effect before the manifestation of the effect. So that is Satkaryavada. I will dwell upon this in little more detail. I just gave an intro to Satkaryavada. Similarly, in contrast to the Satkaryavada, there is Asatkaryavada or Arambhavada by other systems of philosophy like Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Hinayana Buddhism, and a few divisions of Mimamsa, which they say that the cause does not exist in its sorry, the effect does not exist in its cause prior to its manifestation. Before the pot is created, the pot does not exist anywhere. As the Sankhyas would say, the pot existed in in the clay in a causal form, and later it emerged. Philosophers of Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Hinayana Buddhism, and a few schools of Mimamsa, they would not accept that pot existed prior in the cause. They would ask simply, if pot already exists in the mud, then why would a potter exert? Sorry, it is wrongly mentioned as expert himself. It is exert himself. See, if the pot already existed in the clay, why can't we use the clay to carry water? Why should a potter make the pot? So this is the argument that they simply put forth to negate this Satkaryavada. But there are very strong reasons, rather there are 5 reasons which are given by the Sankhya philosophy, especially Sankhya Karika, to establish the notion of the necessity of Satkaryavada, the acceptance of prior existence of effect in its cause before the manifestation. So they say in verse 9, Asada Karanat. So if effect does not pre-exist in its cause, it becomes a non-entity. For example, hare's horn. For example, someone says that a hare has a horn. Normally, cows and other such animals have horns. The hares do not have horns. So the concept of horn is there. The animal hair is there. So it is just like connecting two unconnected things. So that is asadakarana, means if the cause or if the effect does not pre-exist in its cause, then it almost becomes a non-entity, just like appearance of the mirage in the desert. So it appears as if there is water. So there is actually no water. It is just appearance. It is mere vikalpa. It is just imagination. So all these, if we don't accept that the effect pre-exists in its cause, then the imagination can run wild and create anything. Then Upadana Grahanat. That's the second reason for the Satkaryavada. For example, so Upadana, for every thing we go for, we look at a particular Upadana, material. So there is a material basis for everything. For example, if we want curd, we go to the market. Sometimes we directly buy the curd if we don't have time. Normally, what do? We buy milk. So milk is brought, boiled, we drink milk, and then the rest of the milk, we convert it into curd. So everything, if curd did not exist in milk, will we buy milk from the market to prepare curd? We will not. So for any effect, it resides in its cause. So if the effect does not reside in its cause, we will not go for. So for example, a farmer goes to the market and then buys the seeds. If he wants to cultivate paddy, what does he do? He goes and buys the paddy seeds. Or he go for vegetable, he goes and buys the vegetable seeds. If the vegetables do not pre-exist in the seed, then why would he purchase those vegetable seeds? Hence, there is always a material base. Because there is a material basis for every effect. So it indicates that the effect resides in its material cause. So that also indicates Satkaryavada, the pre-existence of the effect in the cause. The curds pre-exist in the milk. That's why we purchase milk from the market to create curd. And then Sarva Sambhava Bhavat. what happens if we don't accept that the effect pre-resides in the cause before its manifestation, then anything can be created from anything. The commentator Gaudapada gives the example, gold cannot be produced from silver, grass, dust or sand. If we want gold, then we have to dig in the ground. We have to go for gold ore. Or similarly, if we want curd, we have to buy only milk. So we cannot buy water and expect the water to miraculously turn into curd. So anything cannot arise from anything. We know that specific things have specific cause. So that also indicates that the effect pre-exists in its cause. And then Shaktasya Shakya Karanat. So all these are very similar arguments. They just bring about a shade of the same idea. So we see something can produce what it is capable of producing. So if there is a potency in that, only that can be produced from it. The mud can produce pot or mud plates, etc. The mud cannot produce gold. The mud cannot produce petroleum. So in this way, so whichever has whichever potential, only that can be produced. So that is also known to everyone. So again, a potter to make pots, he does not buy gold. He goes and brings only clay. So he knows that only the clay is the Shakta and it can produce the pot. Hence, Shaktasya Shakya Karana. Hence also the clay the clay in the clay there is a pre-existence of the pot. And Karana Bhavacha, that is, we see that there is in our experience that there is a lot of similarity between the cause and the effect. That is, the effect possesses what the qualities of the cause. The effect is sometimes the replica of the cause, or at least the effect contains a lots of aspects of the cause. For example, when we see the father and the son, we can recognize that, oh, this boy or this child is from this father, because we see a lot of similarities between the father and the son. Then we can imagine, oh, that this child should belong to or should have emerged from this person. So which indicates the pre-existence of the effect in its cause. And also we see paddy coming from paddy seeds, and wheat coming from the wheat grains. So either there is total replication of cause and effect, or at least there is similarity between the cause and the effect, which indicates the pre-existence of the effect in its cause. So with all these elaborate arguments, the Satkaryavada is established. Now, so based on this, what happens is, this is a very critical point of Satkaryavada. Why Satkaryavada is needed? It is very critical because by this what happens is, the entire creation is emergence, abhivyakti, and dissolution is not a total destruction or annihilation. It is just merging back into the cause, tirobhava. So creation is abhivyakti, emergence from the cause, and then destruction or the pralaya or dissolution is going back to the cause. So which indicates there is no total creation or no total annihilation, or means or an entirely new creation does not happen, and then nothing is cut off from the roots. There is no samula vinasha. So everything exists. There is no total annihilation of anything. This is a very important point. I will discuss about the implications here, but the Satkaryavada is connected to Parinamavada. So thus far, I hope I hope I have given some clarity about what Satkaryavada is. and then the Parinamavada is connected to the Satkaryavada. What does this Parinamavada means? That is, now we just saw that the effect emerges from the cause. Now, what is the nature of emergence of the effect from the cause? Is it a real transformation of the cause into effect, or is it just an appearance of the cause getting transformed into its effect? There are a few ideas in this regard. Sankhya and Yoga consider that the change of the cause into its effect is real. That is, clay getting transformed into a pot is not just an appearance, is not just an illusion, it is real. The clay materially changes into the pot. It is the same clay which has now changed into the pot. This is called as this variety of Parinamavada. There are varieties of Parinamavada. This real change of the effect, cause into the effect, is called as Prakriti Parinamavada. Means the Prakriti, the cause, modifies itself, transforms itself into the effect. And then when we come to the Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, there also the Parinama is real, the modification is real. The cause modifies or transforms itself into the effect, but it is Brahma Parinamavada. It is not the Prakriti which transforms into the world. It is rather the Brahman, the Paramatman, who transforms himself into the form of Jiva and Jagat. So it is the same Parinamavada, whereas the Sankhya and Yoga say that it is the Prakriti that changes itself into the Prakriti and its various evolutes, they change into their respective effects. Whereas in Vishishtadvaita, it is Brahma Parinamavada, it is the consciousness or the pure consciousness, the Paramatman, who changes into the various manifestations of this world. It is very clear that Purusha does not undergo any change in Sankhya. It is the Prakriti that undergoes various modifications. Purusha remains the same, whereas in Vishishtadvaita we see the Brahman itself modifies itself into the world and its variegated manifestations. When we come to Advaita, it is also a kind of Parinama only, but the Parinama is not real. It is called as a Vivarta, means if the transformation or the Parinama is not real, it is an appearance. The silver appearing from the seashell, or the snake appearing from a rope. So the entire world is also similarly an appearance of from the Brahman. So it is a Vivarta. Vivarta means just an appearance or an illusion. So whereas the projection, what has been projected from the reality does not exist, but still it comes from the cause only. So in that sense, so there is a cause and effect connection, there is a Parinama, but the Parinama is not real. The Parinama is just an appearance. So Satkaryavada says that the cause and effect exists, and the cause or the effect pre-exists or resides in its cause before its creation, and then when the cause changes into or transforms into the effect, what kind of transformation it is? It is a real material transformation according to Sankhya. It is the Brahman which modifies itself into all the creations and the manifestations, and the transformation of the world and the jivas, etc., is just an appearance according to Advaita Vedanta. So hence Satkaryavada and Parinamavada are connected to the cause and effect theory and are to be seen together. Now we have seen this. Now what is the implications of Satkaryavada? What am I going to understand by studying the Satkaryavada? How am I going to apply Satkaryavada in my practice, my perception of yoga? I have a few thoughts on this, or else merely learning it as a theory will not serve the purpose. So we see that, as I mentioned earlier, understanding the cause and effect relationship is fundamental for be it the science or philosophy or day-to-day life. So this is a perception, or this is a particular understanding about the connection between cause and effect, which is useful. So we saw that shakyasya shaktasya shakyakarana. So only that remedy which has the potential to solve the problem, that is to be used. So in Satkaryavada, so many points are given as to why Satkaryavada is needed. One of the points that is given there is Shaktasya Shakyakarana. It is very essential for us to understand which tool of yoga, just to give an example of yoga itself, which tool of yoga has the potential to solve what kind of a problem. So, for example, be it asana or pranayama or the visualization practices or the kriyas. So, those are the causes, those are the tools that we have, and then we have to study deeper about the tools and understand the potential of those tools. What are all the potential effects of these practices? So, it is very necessary for us, as when we are in the context of when we are going to use these tools in the context of therapy, yoga therapy, to bring about good effects. So yoga is popular these days because of the effects that it causes, because of the favorable effects that it causes, and hence, so at the level of mind, at the level of body, it gives so many positive effects. So if we have to utilize the proper tool to generate the proper kind of effect, we should understand the potential of each and every tool of yoga that we have. What asana, what pranayama, all that is needed. So it's very important that we have a clear understanding about the innate potential of each and every tool. That is one dimension of Satkaryavada, and in the practice of yoga. That's why the asanas or pranayamas that we learn, we should not merely imitate and learn. We have to go deeper into the mechanics of asana and pranayama and the real potential that they have in effecting the desired result. So that is one direct implication of Satkaryavada in the practice of yoga therapy especially. And then one more basic philosophical or foundation. Now we saw in Satkaryavada, now I think I have to sum up because we are running out of time, and I would also like to take questions from you. Now the implications of Satkaryavada are very interesting, that as I mentioned earlier, the understanding of cause and effect is very important in any system of knowledge, especially in yoga therapy, etc. Now in yoga also we have the tools and the effects that are to be produced from the tools. We have asana, pranayama, dhyana, etc. These are the tools that we have, and it is very essential for us to understand the potency of each of the tool. Now previously we saw that shaktasya shakyakarana means the seed has the potency of the tree or the plant within. That's why we buy that particular seed and sow it on the ground. Similarly, asana, pranayama, dhyana, they have the potential of producing various favorable positive effects on the patients. So it is very essential that we understand the potency of each and every tool of yoga. It is not to be merely imitated. So if the teacher does this technique, I also do the technique of asana, pranayama, kriya, etc. It is very essential for us to go to the root of
the technique, and then what potentials that it has, and what kind of effects it can produce. So what are the potencies of the tools? So that is reminded by the Satkarya Vada. Only when we understand the potencies of the tool, the right kind of effect can be manifested. The abhivyakti of the right kind of effect can happen only when we understand the potency of the tools. So that's why in that sense Satkaryavada reminds us a lot. It is not mere following of the teachings. It is essential for us to look into the potencies of the tool, which means which material or which upadana can produce what effect. That understanding should be known. Doing any asana, will it produce any effect? No. Specific asanas or specific ways of keeping the body, specific type of breathing brings out the specific effect. So there is the effect of well-being resides in the cause, that is the tools. So the understanding of this is very essential. The tool, that is the cause, and the effect are not randomly connected. It is not a cock and bull story. You do pranayama and suddenly you feel a sense of peace. It is not out of magic that it happens. There is this pranayama has the potency to calm the mind. So what is the potency? How does it calm the mind? So the mechanics of it, or all this knowledge is residing within the cause itself. If we explore the cause, if we explore the tools properly, then the effect can be understood better. That is what is the meaning of Satkarya Vada, means the effects reside in the tools or the cause, and hence it is very essential we have a robust, clear understanding of the cause or the tools properly, or else yoga will again become a cock and bull story and not a scientific discipline. So hence understanding the cause and potencies of the cause and the kind of effects it can produce is very essential, and that lesson is given by Satkaryavada. The second most important lesson from Satkaryavada is, which is very important from the point of yoga, from point of view of yoga, is swasthya. That is health, or sorry, the state of well-being resides within every individual. It is not that it is something which is produced from outside. Non-existing well-being is not created. It is the well-being which is innate within every individual, that is manifested through the practices of yoga. When some patient comes for some yoga treatment or naturopathy treatment or for Ayurveda treatment, it is not that in the yoga, Ayurveda, naturopathy clinic we have stored swasthya or the well-being in bottles and we give well-being to people. Where does well-being reside? The well-being resides in the patients themselves, in the people who are seeking care themselves. All that we need to do is make it manifest. As we saw, creation in Sankhya philosophy, in yoga philosophy subsequently, is not creating something new or something from outside. It is manifestation of the inner potential. So every patient, every person who comes for yoga has the innate potential of healing. So that has to be manifested. So as yoga therapists, as yoga teachers, our role is to facilitate the manifestation of swasthyam. So we see the gunatraya also. So what does yoga do? What does yoga do? It actually ensures the dominance of sattva and brings down the effect of rajas and tamas. So where does sattva, rajas and tamas reside? They exist within us only. When we say sattvika ahara, the ahara itself does not contain sattva. The ahara is such that it can evoke sattva in us, evoke sattva which is already present in us. So sattva is not brought from outside, from sattvika ahara. Sattva is there within us, and that is the sattvika ahara helps in manifestation of that sattva. This understanding is essential, because in Western medicine what happens, if I swallow this pill, then so this pill is the one that is going to remove my headache. So that is our understanding, but we swallow that and then we are happy. Unfortunately, that is the approach to yoga that is which is existent now. So if I do this, then I become free. So I'm focused only on the form of the particular activity. I don't go into how the yoga evokes sattva in me, how yoga evokes the innate balance within me. That is not seen, unfortunately. So even in Ayurveda, that is the same. The imbalances of vata, pitta, kapha causes trouble in a person himself. So what does Ayurveda, the medication and the prescriptions, the pathya, etc., what do they do? The innate balance of vata, pitta and kapha is restored only. So yoga is, or Ayurveda is, or naturopathy is not merely focused on arogya, it is swasthya. Swasthya means swasmin sthitihi, means the healing or the state of well-being already resides in the being. Just like the effect already exists in the cause, the healing or well-being already resides in the being. All that we do as yoga teachers, yoga therapists, or Ayurveda practitioners is just facilitating the manifestation of healing. It is not that we are invasively bringing about a change in the person. Yoga especially is non-invasive. You might have heard this. So this is what is non-invasive, that is manifesting the effect from within. So that idea is brought about only by understanding the Satkaryavada, and that is very essential. That sets apart yoga, Ayurveda and all our traditional practices from other systems of healing. And then when we see this idea of no total destruction, we see according to Satkaryavada that everything is just manifestation and dissolution into the cause. Nothing is going to be destroyed forever. No doomsday, no total destruction. If we are not in the manifest state, we will be in the unmanifest state. That's all. So we are all, our body, mind, senses, etc. are part of Prakriti. Now we are in the manifest state. And what is death or what is dissolution? It is going to, it is just going back to the unmanifest state. So it is not that we are going to, our existence is going to be erased once for all. No, not at all. So this gives a sense of psychological reassurance that not everything is going to be destroyed once for all. So this urge or this kind of insecurity, what is called as abhinivesha, vidushopi tatharudha abhinivesha, the klesha of abhinivesha, the insecurity and the fear, all that is caused by insecurity, so that is overcome by the philosophy of Satkaryavada. And then finally, and two more implications to Satkaryavada. I would like to stop with this, that on Chitta also, it has, this Satkaryavada has a lot of implications. Now, why am I thinking like this? Why am I anxious? Why am I afraid? Why am I experiencing some kind of fear? Why am I feeling insecure? Is it due to situations outside? No. There is something called as an innate vasana. So for every effect or every psychological experience that we have, there is a vasana which is an innate vasana, which is the cause. So the idea is that the effect pre-exists in the cause. The idea is we are not anxious because of something external. So our own mental makeup, which is made up of varied vasanas, which is innate within us, that is the cause of the changes in the changes or the afflictions that the chitta experiences. So we have to look within to solve the problems. So that is also another. So the yogic way of looking within also comes from this Satkarya Vada to root out problems. So when we are the problems, then we are the solutions also. This idea also comes from Satkarya Vada. And Parinamavada is also the implication. One more implication of Parinamavada I would like to highlight and then complete, where we see that the change. So unlike the Vivartavada in Vedanta, though it may be the logically or the reality as it has been established by various philosophical discussions, Parinamavada actually is also very reassuring in the sense that the change that we are undergoing is real, in the sense that it is not some kind of an illusion. It firmly keeps our foot on reality. For example, earlier I was inflexible. Now by the systematic practice of asana, pranayama, etc., I have become flexible. So this experience of my own parinama, is it real or unreal? It is real. So in a relative plane, it is very necessary that we follow this parinamavada. So it is very important. Krishnamacharya used to say that a yoga practitioner should observe himself after every session of practice. What are the parinamas that have undergone, or what is the quality of my yoga practice today? At the end of every session, one should think about it. So the parinamas that one has to reflect upon that. Only then improvement is possible, or one's own improvement from the previous state can also be known only when we note the parinamas. So it is not that we should have a Vedantic Vivartavada in our day-to-day practice of asana, pranayama, etc. We have to assume the realistic theory of parinamavada in our day-to-day practice. We should every day observe the parinamas that we are undergoing by the practice. So yoga tattvam, deha tattvam, atma tattvam, all these tattvas are understood by only observing the parinamas that they are making. So how do we understand, how do I understand my own body? By observing my body keenly. What are the parinamas that they are it is undergoing, and how do I understand the effects of yoga on me? I observe the parinamas that it is generating on me. And even about Atma Tattva, it is the same. How is my perception changing about the Atman? So from the point of view of yoga, it is very important that we observe the parinamas, or we are very keenly focused on the parinamas that are happening in us, which are real in the relative plane. Though at the ultimate level, according to Vedanta, these are appearances. Our life in the relative plane is real. As long as we are in this relative plane, it is very essential that we observe the parinamas that are there in our body. Hence, thus we see the Satkaryavada and the Parinamavada have lots of implications, not only in the philosophical context, but also in the practical context also. So there are much more ideas which are to be elaborated, but I end here. I stop my session here, and I'm open to questions. So I feel that to some extent I have given an introduction to the rationale and the foundational concepts of Sankhya, and I'm open to questions now. I thank you for a patient listening.
Thank you, Acharya. Now questions.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, due to westernization, the new generation is slowly drifting apart from our Indian tradition. So how can we inculcate the teachings of Sankhya philosophy to the new generation as adults now?
Yeah. Uh, the it doesn't mean that in every generation there is moving away from that trend is always acceptable or observable, but the point is our the strength of our tradition is guru shishya parampara, that is being very observant in what the texts and the teachings are being taught. So being very observant and developing a sense of shraddha, that is what is important. Bertrand Russell, a Western philosopher, he says that what ails the Western society is the lack of shraddha, lack of faith. But our tradition, people, the younger generation in our country, even now, they are naturally, innately endowed with this shraddha. Only that we have to, in whichever teaching setup, be it school, college, or whatever, university, or even in a private teaching learning setup, if we are able to evoke the sense of shraddha to our tradition, then any negative turn of tendencies can be addressed.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. So, is there any difference between Satyakara of yoga and Satyakarana of Satkarya of yoga and Satkarana of Sankhya philosophy?
There is no difference between Satkaryavada of yoga and Sankhya. They are identical only.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, there has been said like cause come before effects because we see it by that manner. But according to Sankhya philosophy, our mind means manas is the powerful and our perspective is the strongest, right, sir?
Can you repeat the last portion? There was some disturbance. Yeah.
Sir, manas means when the prakriti and purusha they combine, then manas, our mind is the powerful, right, sir?
From Prakriti, when Purusha and Prakriti combine with Purusha Prakriti Sanyoga, the entire evolution happens. So Manas also is one of the evolute from Purusha Prakriti Sanyoga. So what is your question?
Yes. So, sir, if we perceive it that effect comes after cause. But what if we perceive it in the manner what effect comes before the cause?
It can never happen because it can then never be called as effect. So then whatever exists earlier, that is cause, and it is from that cause that the effect can happen. Manas is the effect, and Prakriti Purusha Sanyoga and the evolution of the Mahat, Ahankara, etc. are the causes from which the Manas, the effect, emerges.
Sir, like if I don't want an effect, so what is the why do I want a cause? Cause is for because we want a desire or aim. I have an aim, right, sir?
See, when I am speaking in the context of the evolution, it is not about what we want or what we don't want. So if there is an effect, then there should be a cause. Nothing can exist without a cause. In the context of certain notions, for example, if I don't want that effect, then I should not. If, for example, if I don't want to if I don't want to get a fit of anger, then I should reduce dvesha in me. So in this way, these are notional or predispositional cause and effects. There we have a control. There we can manifest whichever kind of effect that we want if we take control of the cause. Whereas when we speak in the context of evolution of principles, there they are material causes that exist as such.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste. Yes.
On behalf of our colleagues and class, I would like to thank you for both the sessions. Both the sessions were very informative, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So real Jnana Yoga happened through Dr. Jayaraman V. So we appreciate his effort on Sankhya and evolution theory. So sir, I have a question. Whether Parinamavada and Vivartavada and Satkaryavada are the same or any other differentiation in between?
I mentioned about it. Satkaryavada is at a different plane. Parinamavada and Vivartavada are comparable. So, Vedanta also accepts Satkaryavada only. Means nothing has emerged suddenly from out of the blue. Everything has its cause. So every effect resides in its cause. So that is Satkaryavada. So that is common to both yoga and Sankhya yoga and Vedanta. But the change of the cause into its effect, is it real or is it an appearance? So that is where Parinama and Vivarta are two opinions. Yoga and Sankhya say that the change of the cause into its effect, the change of the clay into the pot, that is real. Whereas Vedanta says all the changes that we see from the cause to the state of effect is just an appearance. So of course there is transformation from the cause to the effect, but is this transformation real or unreal, or real or appearance? Sankhya Yoga says the change is real, whereas Vedanta says the change is appearance, whereas there is only one reality, that is pure consciousness.
That is the application of Sankhya philosophy in yoga. So
Yes.
day-to-day practice.
Yes, that's why I, with regard to the application of Parinamavada in yoga practice, I said that it is very important. See, all the changes that yoga brings about is real. It is not mere notion or mere appearance. It is not some kind of abracadabra. They are real. In the sense, earlier I was unflexible. Now by the practice of yoga, I have become flexible. Earlier I did not get sleep. Now by the practice of asana pranayama, I get better sleep. These parinamas are real. We can experience it, and it is very essential that every practitioner of yoga observes the parinamas that are happening by the practice of yoga, which are real. One should not dismiss them as mere appearance. That is the application, that is the practical implication of Parinamavada in yoga.
Thank you. Can we apply Tada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam as defined as yoga?
That Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam is Satkaryavada. That is also in connection to the Satkaryavada. We can see that's its connection to Satkaryavada, because it is not that we are to realize ourselves, we are going outside. Rather, we are going inwards to manifest our own true nature. So that is also connected to Satkaryavada only.
So as the system of naturopathy believes, return to the nature.
True.
Return to the nature. Healing is within.
Very
So
good.
it's each other.
Yes. That stems from Satkaryavada only.
Yes. That's why the Sankhya philosophy emerges on the basis of yoga also, even including naturopathy system also.
Very true.
Thank you very much, Acharya.
Thank you.
Knowledge you have shared with me. Anything else wanted to say, Acharya?
I thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy that students listen to this, and they had a few questions to ask, and I would request them that they should keep their quest for learning more. And as I mentioned in my talk, they should use their anumana more, their inferential capability more. Of course, in the process of learning, receiving inputs from the teacher, and then memorizing, and then giving exams are easy, but the anumana pramana, the inference, the tool of inference, that has to be used more, so which will give more insights to knowledge, and then the practice of yoga, etc., can be better by using the anumana. There is I would like to end my talk with this one quotation from Vyasa Bhashya, which says, Agamena anumanena dhyanabhyasa rasena cha tridha prakalpayan prajnam labhate yogam uttamam. How to attain best yoga? Uttama yoga. Agama is important. Learning from the teachers is important. Understanding the lessons, syllabus, completing the courses, that is important. Agama, that is only one part. Anumana is the second part, inference. So what are the implications of the teaching that I received to my personal life? So that is anumana. Or even for the learning or for the better understanding of yoga, how am I going to use it? So inference is anumana is important, and then abhyasa rasa. So based on learning, based on my own inferences and conclusions, I have to put it into practice and experience the happiness of transformation. Only then our yoga becomes Uttama yoga. That's according to sage Vyasa. So if we want to move from the state of mere yoga to Uttama yoga, we need to use Agama, Anumana and Abhyasa. I would request, I hope students are aware of this and they would put it into practice for their own betterment and the betterment of the community that requires their service. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request you be in offline class, offline guest lecture, as soon as possible we will arrange. So possibly we will arrange in the present academic year. Again, one more class we will arrange on the basis of Sankhya, even more connection to the yoga philosophy also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.